Hey guys, it's Boki here from Gigi's Fabric Shop, home to Juki and Janome Junkies, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to load your quilt onto your tabletop quilting frame. So this is going to be a great follow-up video from David's video that he did teaching you how to set up your tabletop frame. And I do want to make a little disclaimer. We sell two different tabletop frames. There's a Juki one and a Grace one. They really both are very similar. I'll talk about some differences and which one maybe I prefer so you can decide which one's better for you. But really this video is going to apply just about to any tabletop frame because the system is always very, very similar. So let's start off with preparing your quilt and getting it ready to put it on the frame. So I'm specifically working on the Juki tabletop frame right now, which is really nice. The handlebars are located in the front of the machine, so you're kind of driving it down here. I really like this type of setup just because I'm really relaxed. My shoulders are nice and like decompressed. I don't have to think about anything too hard, and I'm kind of like driving a bicycle, right? It's just very natural to me. However, if you're looking for something a little bit more different or a little bit more traditional to like a long arm setup, the Grace tabletop frame has the handlebars that come from the top, so you're driving it a little bit more like a traditional long arm. So that's really the only key difference here. I think one is maybe like an inch longer, but really it's going to be just about the same. So it really comes down to personal preference. I really enjoy the Juki tabletop frame because of that handlebar location. So, but the same setup is going to apply. All right, so getting your quilt ready to put it onto the frame. This frame is 48 inches long. So ideally, working with a quilt that fits in this frame is going to be the nicest. Today, I have this quilt that will fit perfectly in this frame. I don't have any overhang, but I will walk you through some of my tips and tricks. If you want to work on a quilt that's bigger, by all means, you are not limited. If you want to use a large quilt, just keep in mind, the bigger the quilt, the more rehooping you're gonna do, because remember, what machine you put here, that's how much space you have in the throat, and you only have this much space from the left and to the right of the quilt. So keep that in mind. Would I tackle a king quilt on something like this? Probably not, and if you put that much hard work into a quilt, I would recommend sending it to a long armer or somebody who could do it for you. But this is gonna be fabulous for any queen size and under, and I'll walk you through those steps. So let's start off with something that fits perfectly in the frame. Step number one is really going to be getting your quilt sandwich ready. And what I mean by quilt sandwich here is the layers all put together. So layer number one is your beautiful top of the quilt, much like the one behind me. The middle layer of your sandwich is going to be your batting, and then your bottom layer is going to be your backing of your quilt. So here I have prepared a cute little quilt with some Polaroid blocks that I made. Actually, this little pattern for these Polaroid blocks, I just did a sew along for this not too long ago, so check that out in the description below, as well as David's setup video too, okay? So you'll have your quilt top prepared, and you can do this a couple ways. We definitely want to avoid using any pins here because pins are just going to make it harder for you to work around on this type of frame and setup. You don't want to hit them, you don't want to run over them. It's a big no-no. So I would avoid pins, but a couple options for you, especially if you're working with something bigger. With something like this, I really don't have to worry about it too much, but you could baste this into place, and you could do that a couple ways. You could do basting spray, which is certainly a great option, or you can go on your sewing machine and just do a little basting stitch all the way around to hold this into place while you put it on the frame. But just depends on your preference. Since this quilt is nice and small today, I just have it all sandwiched together. It sits nicely on the cotton and kind of like velcros into place. Something to keep in mind with this type of setup, this is not like a traditional long arm, so there's no rails, there's no way to crank these things, there's no leader cloths. This is a simple hooping in system. So whichever system you get, you're gonna get these quilt clips, and I'm gonna walk you through how to use these. It's really simple and really just adjustable to how you need it. So in David's setup video, he does go through adjusting your frame. There's multiple ways to adjust this frame to fit your needs, of course. So the first one being the height. Every machine is a little bit different in height. Some are taller, some are shorter, and I'll walk you through kind of what level you're looking for when you put your quilt on the frame. So that's adjustable in the height like this. You don't have any adjustability from the left and to the right because that's the maximum that this frame does, but you do have adjustments this way as well. Remember, because each machine has a little bit of a different throat space. Today I have the Juki TL 2010 on the frame here today. The 2010 has about an 8.5 inch throat space, so I do lose a little bit from the bar hitting right here, and I'll show you guys what I recommend so you stay within those perimeters. But this is adjustable this way, so that way if you are going to put a bigger machine on this, let's say like the Juki DX7 or the Juki DX4000, the 3000, or the NX7 with those 12-inch throat spaces, you can adjust that accordingly. So refer to David's video for any adjustments that you might need, but let's get started on putting the actual quilt on the frame. So let's get started with hooping the quilt onto the frame, starting on the top first. And remember, through this video, I'm going to give you instructions on how to do something bigger that has overhang and things like that, because the process does look a little bit different for quilts like that. But this quilt fits perfectly into this frame, so the process is a little bit more simplified. All right, so starting off at the top, we're going to have about 5 inches extra on the top, and that's really important to remember on the top and the bottom of the quilts. Not so much on the left and the right side, but specifically on the top and the bottom, because that's how it gets hooped into the frame. All right, so it kind of, you lose a little bit by the time those clamps come on and tighten it into the frame. So 5 inches should be good. It's much like a long arm, right? So on a long arm, you have extra all the way around, again, to accommodate losing some for it to sit onto the frame. Another thing, before you start getting this quilt hooped on, in my case particularly, since it does fit in the frame, I want to make sure that I have enough to move to the left and to the right and sew on the quilt comfortably without hitting the edge. So I'm good on this side. I'm going to go over to my other side. All those little rattling that you hear is my quilt. So actually this quilt, I will have to move a little bit because I don't get perfectly to the edge. So I'm just gonna find a happy sweet spot where I maybe lose a little bit on the edges here, but we're gonna set up our perimeters before we start sewing always so we know where we're at. But it's just a good thing to keep in mind now, because if you can have a workaround, you know, you can get around that. So I'm gonna give myself maybe like a 1/4 of an inch break to the end here, which honestly, if you're basting this quilt down anyways, that's not a big deal. And this side, I get almost all the way to the edge, so I'm going to shift it over just a little bit. So just keep that in mind, and obviously this will look different for every quilt, but it's nice to do that now versus feel the hassle of shifting it around before. So now I'm just going to move my machine off to one side and start on one side. Once I have this kind of in a place that I would like, this is where those 5 inches on the top are going to make the most sense. You're going to grab your quilt clips. And with the Juki tabletop frame, you get a variety of sizes. There's shorter ones that are more ideal for the sides, and then the longer ones you're gonna wanna use on the front and back rails. So grabbing my little quilt clips, these are the Juki tabletop ones. They are blue and they say Juki. Really important for this back rail that you grab the clips and that you can read the Juki logo, because there's a little indent right here for the straps on the back. So I'll show you that in just a second. So once I have this, I'm gonna clip it in, like so, and I can read the Juki logo. I'm going to do the other side as well. I kind of have this rolled up a little bit. You're going to have to roll up this bottom here in just a few moments anyways. And before you clip this side, this is a good opportunity to make sure that you're staying nice and straight as possible, making sure you can see that Juki logo facing you, and then we're going to clamp this one down. All right. And another test that I like to do is also pull the machine all the way to the back and make sure that I can happily sew all the way to the edge, because this is as far as my machine can go back before it starts to hit the actual part of the machine on the rail. So I want to make sure that when I have this all taut, that I can happily sew still on the quilt, which this is good. So let's go ahead and fasten the little straps on the back. You'll notice that there's these long black, like elasticy straps. These are completely adjustable. You can easily adjust them to be as long or as short as you need. And when you start off in the very, very beginning, you're gonna want them probably really short, so that way it clips everything nice into position. And you have to make sure you clip these, because if you don't, you will run this over. And with this long tail that you have, make sure it doesn't hang underneath, because if it does, it will get sewn into place. That happened to me multiple times during the show. There's a little black piece here where this can tuck in, so it's best if you just kind of tuck it to poke up versus down, so that way you don't run it over. And there's going to be 4 of these on this back rail, like this. And then go ahead and get these nice in position and get these guys facing upwards so we don't run them over on accident. All right, so now let's get the bottom rail all fastened with your extra clips that you have. These are going to be a little bit shorter. You get those 2 really long ones, and then you get some of these medium-sized ones. For this bottom part, you're going to want to make sure that the Juki logo is upside down. So the Juki logos should always be facing each other, because again, those little clips those clip slots that are right here, they need to be on the inside of the quilt because the black clips that are coming from the bottom are going to hook around like this. So you got to make sure that this Juki logo is upside down. And you're just going to fasten this in. And we'll make our adjustments as we need to here, but let's just get them into place. And I think I only actually need 2 here. Put these a little bit closer together. Like so. So this is nice and taut. Everything's looking nice and bouncy, kind of like a drum. Think of a drum. It shouldn't be super, super tight, but it has like a nice, you know, tension to it. You don't want this to be super floppy because if it is, your stitch quality is not going to be as good. It needs to be nice and taut. If you have any embroidery experience, you know that your project needs to be not super tight, but just have enough tension here so that the machine can freely move without snagging on anything. So now what do we do with the rest of our quilt, right? So the bottom of this quilt, we're going to start to roll up and out of the way. So I kind of like to fold it like half like this, and then I'm just going to start rolling it towards the machine. And as neatly as you can do this, so your quilt doesn't shift, but as neatly as you can do this part, so that way when you move it, there's no headaches. That's why it's nice to baste this or use a basting spray to get nice clean results. You're going to want to roll this as neatly as you can because this rolled up bit is going to be secured in with these bottom straps like this. So that way it's out your way. And as we move and progress into our quilt, the same thing is going to start happening to the top. So let's go ahead and get this nicely secured and adjusting these bottom connectors, much like we did to the top ones, to hold everything nice and taut. All right, so now you have everything nice and securely fastened. Those straps are all out the way. That's like my biggest advice that I can give you. And then make sure that everything is nice and taut. So like when I'm moving, everything is nice and flat. I have a front open toe foot right now, but I'm gonna switch it to that side open toe so that's visible in front of me. By the way, you guys, any accessories that you might need for your Juki machine, any needles, any threads here today, really anything that I'm talking about in today's video, you can find on JukiJunkies.com. We are a dealer here in Brandon, Florida, and we take customer service very seriously, hence why you have stumbled across our page, because we're always teaching you guys new things, helpful tricks, things to make your sewing life easier. So you can get a little front open toe foot on JukiJunkies.com. Check the description below, but that's going to let me have a front open view, right? Because the machine is now facing me this way instead of being head on to the machine like you traditionally would sew, where this is front open toe, but now when I'm standing here, it's not. So I got to switch that out so I have a better view, but it's really down to personal preference. You don't have to do that. So now as everything's nice and taut, that's always important. You can always kind of like tighten these clips a little bit if you need to. Feel free to adjust. Don't rush. Take your time. You've worked so hard on your quilt project. Take your time to rehoop things if it's necessary, okay? But this is a great moment to do a little test. Make sure everything is nice and clear. You have nothing on the table underneath your workspace, that these straps are all out the way. You're ready to rock and roll. My tip that I like to give when you're starting in a section is, we already did our test to make sure I can get all the way to the back of the quilt, which is great. I'm probably going to do a little running stitch all the way across right here to make sure that the top lays nice and flat and that it stays in place, much like you would on a long arm. So I would highly encourage you do that. Do a nice long stitch here along the top. And then I like to draw my perimeters so I know how much I have space to do my quilting. So I'm going to hit the back of the machine right here, right? So I would draw myself a little indicator, and you can do this along, like you could use a ruler to kind of help guide you here, but until you get kind of used to it and comfortable with it, you can use chalk, you can use friction markers, or whatever your preferred method is here. It's nice to kind of know, hey, this is how much space I have to work with, whatever design you're choosing. Make sure you don't goof up and accidentally hit that back of the machine and ruin your design. So you have this much space, and however much space you have here is going to depend on what machine you're using, okay? So I like to kind of give myself that perimeter here. Also know how far I can go to the edges. Let's see how good I did. Okay, maybe just a 1/4 inch off from the edge, which is okay. I'm not upset about that. I don't even think it's worth moving for that. That's fine. And then over here, about the same thing. Wow, that was totally unplanned. I tried my best. I did pretty good. So that's good. Once you're ready to rock and roll, it's time to play. It's time to have fun. Go ahead and start doing your beautiful quilting designs. Understand how much space you have here. Sometimes what I like to recommend too is if you are able to do like a little test sample or like a test sew on the side. I know on a longarm you have a little bit more room to the left and to the right, but if you were working with something smaller, it'd be nice to do a little test sew on a scrap just to make sure your tension is looking nice, okay? Another really great thing that can be added to this type of setup, you don't need any sort of stitch regulation. You would just sew with your foot pedal and go and try to maintain that consistent stitch quality as normal. But one thing that's really important that you can upgrade to this type of setup is the Sure Stitch Elite. So the Sure Stitch Elite is a stitch regulation that you can put on this, and it plugs into the foot pedal port on your machine, and it regulates your stitches, which is really nice. It really kind of takes this setup and takes it to another professional level. If you're not super talented in free motion quilting, that really takes out a lot of the learning curve in something like this. The stitch regulation is going to maintain your stitch quality. If you're going fast, if you're going slow, it's going to make all the hard thinking of free motion quilting, it's going to take it and throw it out the window. So if you are interested in something like this, I would highly consider and recommend investing into the Sure Stitch Elite to make your stitches look all the more better. Unless you're really gifted in free motion quilting, then you can totally opt out for that too, or maybe start there first and work your way up. But it is very, very nice. So once you're quilting and you've approached the end and you're done, it's time to readjust. You kind of know where your bottom was, so you would unclip everything and start to shift it again. So for the sake of the video, since I'm not quilting this quilt right now on the camera, I'm just going to make some lines here so I know this is my break point. So that way when I shift it up again, the same kind of logic applies. When I go to the end here, I know that I can only work till right about here. I'm going to kind of meet that line somewhere right there so then I can kind of effortlessly make my quilting blend in. And of course that depends on what design you're doing too, but let's now move this and shift this onto the next section of our quilt. All right, so we've shifted the quilt, right? And now we have some in the back and we have some in the front. I see my little faint line here of where I kind of had my limits, so you would see some of my free motion quilting here. And of course at this point, before you've really clamped everything in, you could simply do a little test to make sure. Oh, let me put my needle up. You could just make sure that you're where you need to be. And this is actually perfect because it goes in a little bit to where I was, but this is my line to where I had stopped. So that way I can make the quilting kind of melt in a little bit more, you know? So I have a little bit of wiggle room in the front and the back. So really the same thing's gonna apply here of hooping this back into place. The only extra step that you have now is that you have quilt in the back, and the back is going to get longer and longer and longer, and the front is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So really now all you have to do is kind of start rolling the quilt back here as well and do the same exact thing. This wasn't much, so I won't really have to much adjust these clamps, but of course when this quilt starts to grow in the back, you're going to have to adjust these guys to accommodate to the quilt. So just like this, clamping in, making sure these guys are up and out the way. No sewing over them. Then we're going to do the bottom again, making sure everything is nice and taut, everything is nice and straight. Take your time. Ta-da! Nice and taut, looking at that good pressure there. Perfect, look at that. It's going to be beautiful. And then the same thing here. I have my perimeter there already. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to let myself know, hey, that's how much area I'm working in. So really the process is very, very repetitive, you guys. You're just going to keep going. I do want to give you one really helpful tip about presser foot pressure, and this can change depending on what machine you want. So let's get at a little more eye level on this machine. I'm going to go over some important notes about looking for the right pressure from your presser foot on the quilt when you're quilting. So right now I have that front open toe foot on my machine. This is a hopping foot. So this foot hops up and down when you are free motion quilting, and it is not adjustable in the height whatsoever. So how do you know what to look for? Okay, so on the side open toe, front open toe presser feet, the 1/4 inch and 1/5 inch free motion quilting feet for the Juki TL series in particular, those are all hopping feet. They're not adjustable. So the foot is like bouncing up and down. It lets go and then it makes contact again. it makes even more contact when the actual needle is down. You see there's even more pressure, and then when it comes back up, it loosens a little bit so that way you can move. It's making that hopping effect, okay? So what you're looking for is when your needle is down into the fabric, you want it to have a good imprint on your fabric. There needs to be a little bit of tension there, a little bit of pressure on these type of feet, okay? Now, there is an exception to the rule for the 1/4 inch ruler foot and the echo quilting feet. Those do have a spring located on the back side that you can adjust the height of that foot. We know that when we're free motion quilting, our presser foot pressure located up here on the TLs should be alleviated all the way up. If you are working with something like the Juki TL18, you have a micro lifter. The micro lifter is going to play a little bit of an advantage here to lifting that foot off of your fabric if you needed to, but just depending, the only way to really adjust that on something like this with these feet would be adjusting the physical height of the frame. Remember, that is an adjustable part here, but that's what we're looking for. So that is totally normal. You do want it to make contact. This is with it up right now. It moves pretty freely. I'm not like really pressing down on the fabric. My pressure foot's all the way down. But when that needle is down, it is tight. It's because it kind of has to. It's creating a little bit of tension there to make those uniform stitches. So that's what we're looking for. Apply this logic to whatever machine you have, and that's what we're needing to create those beautiful stitches. So just like that, you can see that you kind of get into a groove with moving your project as you go. And once you get the hang of it, it comes together pretty quickly. So you can use this for all your fun little projects. You could have 2 projects at one time. I can't wait to use this frame for a quilted jacket. That's been on my vision board for 2025. I will get that done at some point. So I'm really excited to use this frame to quilt those pieces. So it's really, really fun. But, Boki, how do I use this if I have a bigger quilt? Fair question. I totally get it. We're not always working with very small quilts like this. So I'm going to show you kind of my little advice when you're working with a really big quilt. Same logic. You're going to have your 3 layers, your little sandwich, the back, the middle, the top, all sandwiched together, ready to go. With bigger quilts, I highly, highly encourage that you have it basted into place with basting spray, or you've basted it around, whatever you need to do to get it really into position, because you're going to be moving it around a lot. Another thing that I'd like to recommend when you do something like this, instead of starting at the top, when you're framing this in, I would recommend starting maybe a little bit more towards the middle or towards a little bit more towards the top. And the reason that is because the quilt is now hanging off the left, the right, the front, and the back of the frame. That gives it a lot more room for things to shift and move out of position. So it's nice to start somewhere from maybe the middle or somewhere not exactly from the top, so that way you can kind of work your way out and push any puckers or things out of the way versus shifting the quilt when you're going down. I hope that makes sense. You don't have to do it like that. That's just my little piece of advice, just thinking logically about how much moving you're going to have to do. Still keep your excess on the top and the bottom, so that way you can freely have enough space to quilt the top and the bottom. You have to have extra. Something we used to do here when we had a long arming service is if you don't maybe have enough for that extra from the backing that you had planned, just sew on a little bit of extra of a scrap or something to give you 4 or 5 inches extra on the top and the bottom. And you might even have to do it on the sides when you're doing a really big quilt like this, but that won't be in the back, but you just need that extra to physically clamp it in. I hope that makes sense. So give yourself extra all the way around, and I'm gonna actually put this quilted quilt on the top of this frame so you can just see what it looks like and how it hangs off the sides, and then I'll show you, kind of how things shift and move around when you have a bigger scaled project like a throw or a queen size quilt. So now that we have it hooped into place, I started a little bit more towards the middle of this quilt. So I have extra on the top and all my extra at the bottom. And now I have this stuff hanging off of the sides. Another little thing that I would probably recommend, just so that way it's a little bit more even, I would probably start more towards one side versus having overage hanging off on both sides. Now that I think about it, just because that way you can have your quilting more effortless versus having just this part and then the edges not quilted. So these are all things you have to think of as you're getting it ready, as you're hooping it into place, because you don't want to have to go on these sides. You know what I'm saying? So it's probably better to start a little bit more towards the middle, off of either the left or the right side, so that way you can work your way in and kind of, you know, maybe work your way back. So maybe work from one side, go all the way, and then go to the edge, and then move it the other way and kind of go in like a zigzag motion. But as far as the sides go and the overhang goes there, remember how I said on bigger quilts, you're definitely gonna want a little bit of extra, especially if you're moving over onto one side, you will need that extra for it to clamp in. So you get a bunch of different sizes, 3 different sizes for clamping your quilts on this. And the reason why you get these little itty bitty babies is because these can go on the sides. So when you have that overage on the side, you also want to make sure there's enough tension here too, just keeping everything nice and stable, especially once you're trying to go to the edges of your bigger quilts. You can clamp these into place as well, to the left and to the right, just like so, and then keep everything really nice and tight, easy to work with, nothing is getting caught, all these straps are up and out of the way, and you're ready to play. So really, it's just a little bit more work with your bigger quilts, totally doable. You just have to really think about where you're starting, where you want to finish, and how you want to go. That's always the thing with free motion quilting, is you always have to be like 3 steps ahead of yourself. So that's how you would kind of do your bigger scaled quilts. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and walking you through how to actually use your quilting frame. My biggest piece of advice is just start. If you're interested in this frame and if you have any more questions, always feel free to reach out to us via email, via phone, however is your preferred method of communication. Give us a call, reach out, and we'll guide you through making the best decision for yourself. But this frame is so much fun, lots of possibilities, great for the person who doesn't have space for a long arm, or maybe you don't want to invest in a long arm right now. This is a great place to start and not have to spend a bunch of money, because you might not even like it at the end of the day. But this is really fun for those smaller scaled projects and allows you to practice a little bit better. It's a different take on free motion quilting, right? Free motion quilting normally on your machine requires you to move the fabric like this, and then the machine is staying put. And I don't know about you, but I really struggle with that type of free motion quilting. It's really hard for my brain to work the opposite way, right? Because when we draw, I'm holding the pen, the paper is staying still, and I'm drawing. Hence, the machine is the pen. This way is much more traditional to how we actually draw, unlike the machine being the pen and then us moving the paper. So this really allows you to free motion quilt a little bit more with control, and with those handlebars being at the bottom on the Juki frame or the top, however you prefer, you really get to do that detail-oriented work. And if you have any questions about that Sure Stitch Elite, feel free to let me know, because that thing is phenomenal, and I would not recommend it any other way. I mean, if you're going to free motion quilt and have it be a breeze, that's the way to do it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, make sure you like this video if you enjoyed or if you learned anything new today. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, as we're always posting new content for you guys every Sunday, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.